regain. Stuck in a losing game, we pass the blame. Cycle starts again, we break. With a chance to remake a top of our mistakes. We follow the lead, but it leads to nothing. When nothing is left to claim. We fell addicted to fame and promise of grandeur, but promises never stain. They say you can only get better from here. They say there's plenty more to go. All the answers turn to words that disengage. A will surrenders, letting our future start to fade away. All the answers turn to words that rearrange. We're caught in the sunset, taking a last breath as we fade away.
Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Restoring the Roar. I am your host, Alex Loosemore. Took a couple weeks off, just kind of let some topics build up here, a little bit more stuff to talk about. Dan Campbell, thank you for tuning in. As always, says, hey Alex, my dude, I'm making calls down to Tampa to trade for Devin White. He's definitely the ankle biter we need for our defense. Yeah, that would be awesome. I would love to get him. I mean, as I've said in previous shows, I'm not big on Alex Anzalone. So I think Devin White would be a massive upgrade. I just wonder what it would cost to get him and then what the contract would look like after that. Speaking of the trade scenarios there, Jeff Okudah was traded earlier today to Atlanta. That'll be the first topic we discuss. Then after that, I've got a couple, my last 2 articles. They haven't been posted yet. I don't know if there's an issue going on with the website that I write for or what's going on, but they're not up there. But I'm going to talk both of them tonight. So 2 weeks ago, I wrote a win-loss prediction just based on the matchups. Obviously, the schedule isn't out until mid-May, and that can really affect wins and losses just based on where games are placed. But I looked through each home game and each road game and kind of gave my thoughts on the games. So you can kind of see where I'm looking at for the Lions this year. And then my article from last week is 5 picks I like on draft day 1, so the Thursday night, which is the first round. I went kind of 5 positions, and then for certain positions, I gave a couple players at each spot. Ben Cornett says, Kitty, thank you for tuning in, Ben. Tell that damn Campbell guy to leave Devin White alone. Yeah, well, if he's requesting a trade, we're one of the few teams that has enough money to get him and pay him. So Detroit is a possibility. I'm thinking he ends up in Philly. They actually have the money. And I think they would be willing to trade whatever it would take to get him. So I do think he ends up an Eagle personally if they do end up trading him. But hopefully he comes to Detroit. Before we actually get into the topics of the show, I'd like to remind you guys all that this show is proudly sponsored by Zagnif Apparel. So you can use the code word FOOBS15 at checkout and get a 15% discount on select items using the link in the banner below. So www.etsy.com/shop/Zagnif Apparel Design. And then, enter the code word FOOBS15 and get 15% off on select items. Andrew, thank you for tuning in. One of my co-hosts at North Sports Dynasty, actually the one that runs the whole damn thing. So thank you for tuning in. Let's hop right into the Jeff Okudah trade discussion. So he was traded to Atlanta today for a 2023 fifth-round pick. It's actually the 5th round pick Atlanta got from Jacksonville for sending them Calvin Ridley. It was the 5th round pick that we now have and a conditional 2024 4th, probably based on if he plays and stats and all that. Speaking of stats, I have some stats here for Okudah. So he's only played in 25 games over the 3 years. He played in 15 of those this past year. Had a combined 10 in 2020 and 2021. Had 9 in his rookie year. Dealt with some shoulder and groin injuries that kept him out of the other 7 games. And then 2021 was the start of the 17-game season. He only played 1 game, tore his Achilles in the San Francisco game to start that season, and didn't play the rest of that season, obviously. He came back and started off very well this season, but the stats don't really show the kind of player he is. Andrew said, I ain't gonna lie, I thought he'd go for a 3rd. I was thinking 3rd, 4th, maybe, but I'm not shocked at the 5th either. He's very unproven. Last year, the deal. And if he signs that, or if they accept his 5th-year option, which they've got till May 1st, I believe, to do, I've got the value of it coming on the next little banner here. But yeah, he's very good in that press man coverage, which isn't shown in a stat. But the 2 interceptions, 10 passes, defended mostly like deflections, that kind of stuff, shows that he's not great at tracking the ball. When the ball's up in the air, he's not great, but he's good at locking guys down. Like I believe it was week 3 that we played the Vikings this year in Minnesota. He held Justin Jefferson to 3 catches for 14 yards. I believe it was 6 to 8 targets somewhere in there, but Kirk Cousins just went away from Jefferson in that game because Okudah was doing such a good job. And then I don't remember if Okudah got hurt or what, but all of a sudden Oruwariye was playing on him, or they changed the scheme and went just kind of one guy on each side instead of Okudah following Jefferson. I still don't understand why. But they started picking on Oruwariye, who got all those penalties, gave up all those yards. Big reason why we lost that game. Ben says, is it his injury history that may have led to Okudah being traded? It was the injury history. He wasn't a Brad Holmes pick, so it doesn't shock me that they moved on from him. We signed all those guys. This corner class is so good. There's a whole bunch of reasons why Okudah got traded. I expected it to happen. I've been hearing a lot of stuff in the last week or so about him being traded. I thought it would be either draft night or after the draft, personally, but I'm not shocked to see them get the pick now. I'm glad it gives us an extra day 3 pick where Brad Holmes seems to be money in the draft. So hopefully he uses that to get another stud player. And I think this locks in that we're getting a corner in the 1st round, either at 6 or 18. The other stat I wanted to bring up here is the 124 tackles and the 6 tackles for loss. The majority of both those stats happened this year. He took a massive step forward in the run game, in being able to come up, stop the run, and get the running back down. He did a very good job this year. I was very impressed with him on that. But his overall play kind of nosedived about halfway through the season. About the first 4 or 5 games, I thought he was going to be a number 1 corner. Like, I thought we'd kind of found our guy. And then as the season went on, he just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And ended up getting replaced by guys like Will Harris, Jerry Hughes, just guys that shouldn't be playing over a third overall pick, but they were just outplaying him. So it was time for him to get a change of scenery, I think. That's why you were right at work, should have been a safety. Yeah, I think with that Achilles injury, it takes a lot of your athleticism away. So my opinion, and I said this to Andrew at work as he just stayed there, I thought he should have moved to safety. I was saying that before last season. And then he started out so well at corner that I was like, okay, don't touch it, leave it alone. And then it kind of, like I said, went downhill. He didn't start playing as well. So, and Atlanta's not going to play him at safety. They've got Bates and those kind of guys back there. I think this is a really good spot for him to go because he's not going to be your number one guy like he was in Detroit last year, or what they expected him to be. You got AJ Terrell there. That's your number one guy. He can compete with the other guys, Casey Hayward, those kind of guys, to be the number two corner or even slot into that nickel area, where I think he could do very well because you don't have to be as agile as you do on the outside. But yeah, I hope he balls out for them. And it'll be interesting to see if Atlanta picks up that fifth-year option. Like I said, they've got about, I think, like 20-ish days to do it. So the fifth-year option is worth $11.5 million. The value gets set by the NFL based on stuff like Pro Bowl selections, minimum snaps, participation rate over the 3 seasons. And it's set up in different tiers. There's tier 1, tier 3, 2, tier 3, and tier 4. So tier 1 and 2, you're only eligible if you made a Pro Bowl. Okudah didn't, so he slid immediately down to tier 3. And the minimum snap participation to get tier 3 is 75%. He has not played 75% of his snaps he was eligible for over the 3 years. Obviously, he's played in 25 of possible like 40-something games. I believe his snap participation rate is like 55. So he immediately falls into that fourth tier, which is this $11.51 million. I'd be interested to see what that top tier is making this year. But again, I have no idea what Atlanta's going to do here. Maybe our Falcons analyst for NSD, Kyle Yacey, will have a better idea if he's on Friday's show. We'll ask him there. But yeah, like I said, this locks in a corner early in the draft. I wouldn't be shocked if we go either Gonzalez or Witherspoon at 6. If they've fallen in love with one of those guys, they're gone at 6. Or we could take one of the top D linemen and just go the best available corner at 18. That wouldn't shock me at all either. I believe we're back to double defense, though. I know there was lots of talk. I was even talking about some offensive players, and there's a couple in that second article that I brought up, but I think we're back to double defense. Witherspoon's growing on me. I've been so set on Gonzalez, but the more I watch of Witherspoon and just the chemistry he'll already have with Kirby Joseph, who we drafted last year, I think Witherspoon might be the better pick. I think it could end up that Gonzalez is the better player, though. He's just that athletic freak that hasn't really been able to show off his talent because a lot of the Pac-12 quarterbacks just avoided him altogether. So he wasn't really being targeted, wasn't really being tested, but he's big, he's strong, he's fast. I mean, he was locking the guys down in coverage. That's why he wasn't really getting tested. So, yeah, I'm excited to see how both those guys do in the NFL, and if we get one of them. I would love to get one of them. Pair them with Cameron Sutton and Emmanuel Mosley, CJ Gardner-Johnson, all the weapons we have in that defensive backfield now that was once a weakness. Now it's become a strength. Yeah, and then hopefully we can shore up the front end of the defense, specifically the defensive tackle spot, in my opinion. All right. I'm going to go to the first article now. So that current win-loss prediction based off of strictly matchups. I do have the records of the last decade. So, like, for example, the Bears at home, I've got the record for the last decade when the Bears come to Detroit. So I've got it for every single matchup. All 17 games have their record over the last 10 years. Some of them are 1 game. Obviously, some are 10. And everything in between. So we'll see how that goes. And then I've got the record so we can follow along as we go for whether I choose a win or a loss. We're going to start with the home games. So I started with the Chicago Bears. I just went on to, I believe it's fbschedules.com, and just went on the list they gave me. So it's not, you'll see a streak of wins and a streak of losses through the article, but it's not set up that way on purpose. It's just the list that they gave me. I went in that order. So the Lions are 6-4 against the Bears in Detroit over the last decade. It surprised me a little bit. I thought it would be 5-5 or worse, especially with some of the bad years we've had, but then they've also had quite a few bad years recently as well. The Bears typically play the Lions very close. The home game last year against the Bears was not close at all. I think it was 41-14, somewhere in there. We beat them up pretty good. Hutchinson picked off Fields. We were in Fields' lap all day. I expect the Bears to be a much better team this year. But I do still think the Lions are the better team. I have them getting a W here. Another thing to remember, the Lions went 5-1 in the division last year. Now, do they do that again? You'll have to see what I think as the article goes on here. But it's going to depend again a lot on where the games are placed in the schedule. And it's going to be interesting to see. I believe the NFL rule is every 8 years you have to play one of the international games, so Europe, Mexico, something like that. The Lions were heavily rumored to go to Germany to play Kansas City. It's pretty much a lock now that Chicago is going to play Kansas City in Germany. But there's still all those games in London. I believe there's another game in Mexico City this year. And the last time we played was 2015, so that should mean the Lions are getting an international game this year. Pretty much forced into one. The home teams for those games have already been decided. I don't remember who all they are. I believe the AFC West. I don't know for sure, but I believe there's like 6 or 7 international games this year. Andrews is 4-2 in my opinion, swept by the Packers. No, not that ain't gonna happen, especially if Rodgers isn't there. Speaking of the Packers, at home the Lions are 6-4 in the last decade. I was shocked by that too. I guess when you think about it, there were a few years there where Aaron Rodgers was hurt, and you're rolling out guys like Brett Hundley and those like guys that aren't nearly as good, Deshaun Kaiser, those kind of guys. So it does kind of make sense in that aspect. But we've also won the last 2 at home. So we've beaten them with Rodgers the last couple of years. And I think we beat them whether they have Rodgers or not at home. I just expect if they're rolling with Jordan Love and it's later in the season, I think this game is pretty close. Just because I think then Jordan Love will have some time in the system, some time with game reps at game speed, and I think he'll be a little more competent at quarterback. But if we get this like week 1, week 2, week 3, I think we could beat them pretty easily. I don't have much faith in Jordan Love, but we'll see how he does, or if Rodgers ends up staying, if the Jets don't pull their heads out of their asses and make this trade happen. But regardless, I think it's a win here. And the last divisional game at home, the Vikings, it's a 5-5 record in the last decade. So if you look at that, the Lions are 17-13. I think that adds up. 17-13 at home against the division. So winning record there. And I think they sweep the NFC North at home. I think this is a very close game as it's been the last 2 years. But the Lions have won 2 in a row at home against the Vikings. I look for them to make it 3 straight. The Vikings are still going to be a damn good football team. But I don't like as a Lions fan, I love the losses they've had to their secondary and their defense overall. Losing Kendricks, losing Peterson, like all their defensive leaders outside of Harrison Smith. You've got guys like Zadarius Smith that wanted to be released. It's just a mess on that defense right now. Now, Brian Flores could drastically change that and the addition of Byron Murphy absolutely helps. But I see this as a mismatch for the Lions against that Vikings secondary, and the Lions have the O-line to stop that pass rush. So I think 3-0 so far. We get the Atlanta Falcons at home. We've only played them once at home in the last decade. We've played them 4 times overall, but they've pretty much all been in Atlanta. This one, if I got some Lions fans watching, I believe it was 2020. We were 2-0, 3-0, something like that. And then the Falcons came in. They were also undefeated. And this is the one where Golden Tate got stopped at the 2-yard line, 3-yard line, something like that. They said he fumbled. He didn't. But they reviewed it, said he fumbled. And because the call on the field was the fumble, so they didn't have enough evidence to overturn it. So the Falcons won based on that right at the end. Andrew says I recall this. Yeah, that was a heartbreaker. I remember I was listening to that one on the radio, and I was at my ex-girlfriend's place, and I was just like losing my mind because I was like, oh my god, we're gonna go like 4-0, and then that happened, and I just yelled. It was not a good time, but I think we win this one. The Atlanta Falcons, while they're making strides to be better, like I said about the Packers and Jordan Love, I do not have faith in their quarterback Desmond Ridder. Obviously, we haven't really seen much from him, but the 3, 4, 5 games he played last year didn't instill much faith in me. And it's kind of weird that they're so quickly out on Lamar Jackson. I know all the money and everything is a big part of it, but you'd think with the way they've built the rest of that roster and they're getting close to being a quarterback away, you think you'd take the shot, but I don't know. I think it's a win here. So 4-0 for the home games so far. The Carolina Panthers at home were 1-1 in the last decade. We've played them a couple more times on the road. I believe we're 0-2 or 0-3 in those other ones. The Panthers beat us last year. We played terrible in Charlotte in that game. Jared Goff was the only really good thing that day. He threw for like 300 yards. We only scored like 15 points, though. And the defense could not stop the run to save their lives. This is a much different Panthers team than the last time, though. We don't know who the quarterback is yet. I still think it's Stroud. Although there's different people in that building like different quarterbacks from what I've heard. There's certain people that like Bryce Young. There's certain people that like CJ Stroud. And there's even some people that like Will Levis as the number one guy. So it'll be interesting to see who they actually take. But with the lack of outside weapons, a newer quarterback, I think it's a tough one, but I think it's a win. I'm expecting somewhere like a 13-10 kind of game, honestly, because that defense is good. Bryce Young is the Vegas favorite at plus 175. That's interesting. What are the odds for Stroud? Because I might go put a couple bucks on that, honestly. Where are we? Yeah. I've got this being a very physical game. Obviously, Deuce Staley, our running backs coach and assistant head coach from last year, is now the same role in Carolina, left to be closer to his mom, who's battling a sickness. I think there's not quite enough there for them. Okay, plus 350, yeah. If it's that, I'll take it. I'll put a couple bucks on it. It's a tough, very tough game, physical game. Their defense will give us fits, and that's why I think it's like a 13-10, very low scoring kind of game. I don't expect them to be able to run on us like they did last year. The Denver Broncos come into town. Sean Payton against his former coaches in Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn. This is a very interesting one because they know how Payton likes to run things. Payton knows how they like to run things. So there's going to be a lot of familiarity with this game. I don't think we're going to get the same Broncos team we saw last year. I think we get a much better Broncos team. I don't think Russell Wilson's going to be as bad as he was. He was the most sacked quarterback. I think that's a huge part of it. But I do, and I said this on either the NFL edition last week or North Sports Dynasty. If you take the quarterback out of it, the Broncos are a top 5, top 10 roster. If you take out quarterback play, if you look at every other position, the Broncos are at least top 10, if not top 5 in that on that roster. Now minus 300 for Young. Stroud is plus 220. Interesting. I gotta take a look at that later. Yeah, so I think you get better quarterback play. A big part of this is going to be, when is Javonte Williams healthy? Is it before or after they play the Lions? Because, I mean, obviously they have Samaje Perine, who's still a very good running back. But I think Javonte Williams could be a difference maker in this game, especially with an improved offensive line for the Broncos. Obviously, it's an improved defensive line. Well, hopefully, it's an improved defensive line for the Lions. I do have this as a loss, though. I got, as I said in my article, I have the master beating his disciples. So we go to 5-1. I think the Broncos are going to be pushing for a playoff spot. I don't think they quite get one because the AFC is loaded. But I think the Broncos get the best of us. And I could see it being a close but high-scoring game. But we'll have to see how that goes. The other AFC West team that comes into town is the Raiders. We're 1-0 against them in the last decade. Also, the Broncos won where we're 0-1 in the last decade. That was, I think we played, it was Sunday night or Monday night. I know it was a primetime game, but it was when Peyton was still on the Broncos, Peyton Manning. So, and they beat us pretty good. I remember that. It wasn't that close. This Raiders one, though, can't remember what year we played them. Obviously, we beat them 1-0 against them. And I think we do it again. I just don't know. And obviously, this is before the draft, but I'm not impressed with that Raiders offensive line. Obviously, you still have Jacobs, Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow. You've still got a ton of weapons there. The tight end spot is a huge question mark because obviously you traded Darren Waller. Foster Moreau, unfortunately, retired because of Hodgkin's lymphoma. So you're definitely going to have to get somebody there. Probably look for the Raiders to draft one in the second or third round. But, yeah, that offensive line is not very good. That defense, while you still have key players on different levels of the defense, is still a mess. And I've made this very clear on the NFL edition a few times. I do not have faith in Josh McDaniels as a head football coach. You can say, like Johnny did last week, that he brought Tim Tebow to a playoff game. But when you have players coming out and saying that they were Spygate 2.0, and Broncos players saying that, you can know what they're going to do, and it's easier to beat them. Sean, thank you for tuning in, man. Says, what's up, Alex? Says Washington versus Detroit in the 2023 wildcard game. Dude, I would love to see that. It would be a lot of fun to trash talk that week because we're pretty tame last year. But if playoffs are on the line, I think it's on. It'd be either radio silent or lots of trash talk for the week. The Let's Talk College Football show would be interesting, to say the very least. Especially because that's bowl season, national championship season, right in around there. So very key time for that show. Yeah, I've got us winning against the Raiders. I just don't think they have enough on defense. And I think we can exploit their defense very easily. I do expect it to be high scoring, though, with all the weapons that Vegas has on their offense. He says, yes, sir, we want Detroit. What, no Dallas anymore? What's going on with that? He says, yeah, I would. And then the last home game of the season for Detroit, just based on that list, is the Seattle Seahawks. We are 0-2 against them in the last decade in Detroit, and it doesn't get much better in Seattle. I think we're 0-2, 0-3. Off the top of my head, I know we have 2 losses. In Seattle, we got mauled in the playoff game. And then you had that one where the refs not knowing the rule lost the game. We drove down right at the end. Calvin Johnson was going to dive into the end zone. Cam Chancellor made a hell of a play, batting the ball out, made him fumble just before the goal line. And then I believe it was KJ Wright swatted the ball out of the back of the end zone, which you're not allowed to do. Should have been Lions ball at the 1 with like a minute and a half left. But the Seahawks got the ball at the 20. So that sucks. It sucks that I just remembered that. But Seahawks last year came into Detroit. They won a 48-45 barn burner. Both defenses are improved this year. Obviously, Seattle got Bobby Wagner back. We've loaded up on defense, especially in the secondary. I expect the game to be fairly similar, though, except this time I think we get the win. I don't think the defense will be as bad as it was in that game. I don't expect Geno Smith to go for 48 points again. I'm thinking somewhere in the 35-31 range. Still very high scoring, but I think Detroit gets the win this time. Seattle could go either way. Panthers could go either way. Like, this could very easily be 5-3 instead of 7-1. Obviously, the divisional games could go either way too, so it could flip on a dime very quickly. But as of now, I have 7-1 for home games. Now on to the away games. Against the Bears, again, we're 6-4 in the last decade. So we're 12-8 overall against the Bears in the last decade. This game was, if I'm not mistaken, it was 31-30 this past year. So I expect the game to be fairly similar because, like I said, for the home game against the Bears, they are a much improved football team. I think it could be very similar to that game from last year. I don't expect it to be like our home game last year where we beat the brakes off them. But I do think we steal another win here. 8-1 so far. Don't worry, I don't have the Lions going 16-1. You'll see some more losses pop up here fairly soon. The Packers. We are 4-6 at Lambeau in the last decade. So we're 10-10 overall against Packers in the last decade, sitting right at 500. A lot of what I said for the Packers earlier fits into this one. The last 2 years we're 3-1 against the Packers. We're kind of starting to take control against them. And if Aaron Rodgers is out, I don't really have faith in them. So I think it's another win. Sitting at 9-1, 5-0 in the division. The last one here is against the Vikings, the last divisional game. We are 3-7 against the Vikings in Minnesota in the last decade. And I think we've lost 5 in a row in Minneapolis. And I think it becomes 6 in a row. I've got another loss here, sitting at 9-2. Minnesota has been a very tough place for Detroit to play. Even the games we've won in the last decade, we won an overtime game. We won like a 1 or 2 point game. The games with the Vikings in Minnesota for the last little while have pretty much been 1-score games the entire time, both home and away. So I don't expect any different because that's become the norm. But I do think Minnesota pulls a close one out as they have the last few years. So Andrew, if you're still watching, there's this one here. The Lions travel to Tampa. The only time they played in Tampa in the last decade, the Lions won. That was back, I want to say like 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. So obviously it was a younger Jameis Winston. So Andrew can give you his thoughts on that on one of these other shows coming up soon. But based on what the Bucs are doing right now, it seems like they're going into a quick kind of retool here. Might change a bit if Devin White actually gets his request and gets traded. But I do have the Lions winning this game. I don't expect it to be a big win because that defense in Tampa Bay is still very good. As of now, I don't trust the offensive line. I don't trust quarterback play. And it's unknown if Rashad White can be an actual number one. The receivers are still deadly with Evans and Godwin. I think they'll give us fits, but I do think the Lions pull it a close one because we'll have the ability to control the clock if we can control the line of scrimmage. The Saints, this one actually surprised me quite a bit that we're 2-1 in the last decade. If you add a couple more years on, I believe it becomes 2-3 or 2-4. We lost to them in the playoffs in 2011. We got slaughtered. But I was kind of surprised at this one because New Orleans is a very tough place to play for anyone, divisional or not. So for us to have a winning record there, I know it's just 3 games, but that still kind of caught me off guard. I think it goes to 2-2 though. I've got a loss here. Again, it's a lot of familiarity. We know a lot of what the Saints do based on our coaching, and based on our coaches, they know a lot of what we do. So it's a fairly similar quarterback matchup, Goff and Carr, because I do think Carr will bounce back. I think they're 2 of the better quarterbacks in the NFC right now. They're both top 5 quarterbacks in the NFC. That's not saying much, though. The NFC is pretty weak for quarterbacks. Saints still have a good defense. I think Cameron Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore, all those guys can give us fits. Honey Badger's still in the secondary there. Mario Davis in the linebacking core. This is still a very good football team. I think they turn it around this year, and they get one of their wins against us. So we're sitting at 10-3 now. We've got 4 more games to go. The game I thought might be in Germany. It is not. So we go to Arrowhead. The last time we actually played the Chiefs on the road was our last Europe game. We played them in London in 2015. So I do that. They beat us pretty good. And then I believe it wasn't Jim Caldwell that got fired at that time, but it was the GM that hired him, Martin Mayhew. Got fired at that time. I believe he's GM or in the front office in Washington right now, actually. Sean, if you're still watching. I think he's in your front office. But the Chiefs beat us. It's pretty simple. The Chiefs are the reigning Super Bowl champions. I don't know if this one will be that close. I think it could be a lot like the Chiefs-Rams game that Goff played Mahomes in, and I believe 2018, the 54-51 absolute barn burner on Monday Night Football. It could be something very similar to that, or it could be a lot like when the Lions played the Chiefs in Detroit in, I want to say, 2020, where it was back and forth, but it was still only like 34-31, somewhere around there. The Chiefs still won that game, and I think they win this game too. He says, yes, sir. Thank you for him. He played for us. Oh, okay. I didn't know that, actually. Because I know after he got fired from us, he went to San Francisco for a little bit and was an assistant in their front office. And then I thought I had heard that he went to you guys. So glad he's doing something good for you guys because he didn't do much for us. I will say that. So I'm glad he's helping you guys out a little more than he did us. The other AFC West game, the last AFC West game for 2023 is the Los Angeles Chargers. It's in Los Angeles. The last time we played the Chargers, I believe it was still San Diego at that time. We opened the season against them and we lost. So 0-1 in the last decade. I think this is you're playing a top 5 quarterback. In my opinion, I think Herbert is in the top 5. You're playing against a bad head coach. So I think that could limit them. If this is week 1, week 2, like before all the injuries happen to those key players, that happens every year, looking at Bosa and Derwin James and all those guys, the Chargers could beat the brakes off us. The Chargers are one of my dark horses for the Super Bowl. They have been the last couple of years, and that's not changing. I think this is a loss. I really do. It's going to be close because Brandon Staley is not a good head coach. Can't control the clock, goes for it way too much. All the stuff we've said about Dan Campbell for years too. And the Chargers are just, if you look at 1-53, he's a better. The Chargers are the better team. Sean said he played opposite of Darryl Green for us and opposite of Deion Sanders at Florida State. I did not know that. Wow. Okay, you learn something new every day. This win-loss streak here I'm about to show does not favor the Lions at all. In Dallas, we're 0-4 in the last decade. That includes the playoff game. Seems to be a common theme here, where a missed call late in the game led to us losing the game. We were winning at this point, trying to kill the clock. It was a third and medium, third and long, and we were throwing it to Brandon Pettigrew, an old school tight end. I think we drafted him with Stafford in 2009, if I'm not mistaken. And the linebacker literally had his back to Stafford, was running into Pettigrew, and just kind of threw his arms up and just basically ran over Pettigrew. And no pass interference call happened. And then, of course, the next play on fourth down, we shanked the punt. It was awful. And then Romo took them down the field and scored right at the end. So if that penalty's called, who knows what happens. Obviously, it's not the reason we lost the game, but it's a leading factor into it. Ouch. Yeah. There's a couple of rough playoff losses here. And yeah, like I said, 0-4. The only win I think we actually have against the Cowboys in the last decade. No, we have 2 wins in the last decade, but I think we're 2-6 or something like that. The most recent win, most football fans will know this one. It was the one where Stafford's running down the field yelling clock it, and then gets the snap, and instead of spiking it, reaches over the goal line and scores with 2 seconds left, something like that. Was a phenomenal game for both sides. It was a very fun game to watch, and we got the win on that one, but we do not get the win on this one. We go to 0-5 against the Cowboys in Arlington in the last decade, and it continues to get ugly. I do think it's fairly close. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the draft. If they do what I think they're going to do, this game could be ugly, but I don't know. I think they're getting Bijan. I think they're trading up for Bijan Robinson. So if you pair him with Tony Pollard, if Pollard's back healthy by that point, with McCarthy wanting to lean more on the run game, that it could get ugly pretty quick. First playoff win was against Dallas. Might be. Interesting. I gotta look that up. I can't remember off the top of my head. I know we've won one playoff game. We won one playoff game in the 90s, and that was our first one since the 50s. So it's kind of ugly as of late. The last game of the season, based on us and Baltimore both placing 8th in our respective conferences, we play each other. And since we hosted the Jaguars last year for this ranking matchup, we go to the Ravens. We're 0-1 in the last decade there. They also beat us 2 seasons ago now in Dan Campbell's first year, week 3. But it took everything they had to beat us. And I mean that because it was the record-setting field goal by Justin Tucker, 67 yards. I remember that one because when they ran the field goal unit out, I turned to my dad and said, yes, we won the game. There's no way he's hitting from 67 yards. And then it hit the crossbar, and I was like, see, told you it's not we won the game. And then it hit again and rolled over, and all I could do was laugh. I was like, are you effing kidding me? It was just it was just same old Lions luck. Christopher Cole, I said right off the bat in the show, I would love Devin White. I would love what he would bring to the middle of that defense. I would gladly take him. It just depends on how much y'all are asking for. Hopefully not too much, but because I know he's going to be asking for a lot. But yeah, the last few times we've played the Ravens, it's been extremely close. It's going to depend a lot on who their quarterback is here. I do think Lamar Jackson's coming back, especially now that they signed OBJ. He's got a legitimate receiver. I don't know that it's a legitimate number one anymore. I don't know if OBJ can be that guy. But, oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, that's our last playoff win, Sean. Our first one in the Super Bowl era and our last one so far in the Super Bowl era. So ever since they named it the Super Bowl, it's been ugly because we won like 4 or 5 championships in the 50s and one playoff game since. But speaking of wins and losses, I think we get a win here. I don't expect much from the Ravens offensively. Although it'll be interesting to see what their scheme is now that they've changed OCs. So, but I don't expect too much different, honestly. Yeah. That's why you need to make the playoffs so we can get our revenge. And we need to make the playoffs. I shouldn't just assume we're making the playoffs. I do have us at 11-6 though currently, which would guarantee a playoff spot that would win the division. But yeah, we'll see what happens there. And then gonna hop into the last article. So 5 picks I like on draft day 1. So like I said, start the show. That is Thursday night, the 27th, just over 2 weeks away. So like I said before, I went by position. So I'll show you number 1. I went with the edge rushers first, based on kind of where everyone is on the board. So I went Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, or Nolan Smith. I think one of Anderson or Wilson, if not both, will be off the board by 6. I'd be happy with Nolan Smith at 6 as well. But if Anderson or Tyree Wilson is on the board, I think you have to consider taking them. I think you'd be stupid not to. They're all phenomenal pass rushers. Obviously, Anderson is the best pass rusher out of all of them. He was the best pass rusher out of last year's class. And yes, that's better than Aiden Hutchinson. He was the best defensive player in college football in 2021, in my opinion. And then it seemed like he was just kind of on cruise control this year, just biding his time to get to the NFL. Which I don't hate it. You see people get hurt all the time. I mean, with NIL money and everything, you're getting your money already. So that changes things a little bit. But Tyree Wilson and Nolan Smith, they bring more in the run stopping game, which, I mean, we already have Hutchinson, Josh Pascal, a bunch of guys on the edge that can help in that run game already. So if you're more worried about the run game, I would go defensive tackle first. But Tyree Wilson, with his wingspan, his frame, if you could put another 20 pounds on that frame, you could slide him in to play that 3-tech beside Aleem McNeil very easily. I love what he brings to the table, his versatility. And Nolan Smith, that smaller frame, but man, is he strong. He's very good against offensive linemen, very good at holding them out, and then seeing where the running back is, getting off the block and going to make the play. And he's stupid fast, man. The 4.39, 4.37, whatever it was at the combine. He's an elite athlete. If I'm not mistaken, he was the number 1 overall high school prospect in his recruiting class. And just when you're playing with so many 5 stars and the injuries he's had and everything, makes sense that he's kind of been lost in the shuffle, which is weird to say for a guy that's probably going to go top 15. But I would love to get any of these 3 guys. I'd probably go in the order they're listed here, just because I think if you get Anderson as the pure pass rusher and then Hutchinson on the other side with his versatility against the run and the pass, that would be scary. Tyree Wilson, to kind of, you let him develop. He's the athletic freak right now, but he's still raw as a prospect. But if you let him develop across from Aiden Hutchinson, good Lord, that's a scary duo. And Nolan Smith, man, same thing. And just his ability to get after the passer, his athleticism. You can put him as a stand-up linebacker. He's that athletic. I love what all 3 of those guys bring to the table. Sean says, Will Anderson did his best. Jadeveon Clowney taking his senior year to just relax. Absolutely. His junior year cemented his position in last year's draft as well as this one. So, yeah, I was saying last year and all of this year, if he was eligible to go last year and did, he's the first overall pick. I mean, Hutchinson should have been the first overall pick last year. Thank you, Jacksonville. But Will Anderson would have been the first overall pick in last year's class. He was the best player in last year's class. Just couldn't go. Kind of a lot like Caleb Williams and James Harrison Jr., those kind of guys this year. They're good enough to be top 5 picks this year, but they can't go. They're too young. So, yeah. Will Anderson just tried not to get hurt. Tried to save his money, and he did. So yeah, I would definitely love to have one of those guys there. 2 other players I would love, mentioned them earlier, Christian Gonzalez and Devon Witherspoon, corners from Oregon and Illinois, respectively. Devon Witherspoon has a connection to the Lions already. He played with 3rd-round pick from last year, safety Kirby Joseph. So those guys have some chemistry together already. He's a very good man cover corner, good in press coverage. And Christian Gonzalez is right there with him. The press coverage, all that. He's, again, another guy that's a little more raw. Witherspoon, you kind of know what you're getting. Gonzalez is, again, the athletic freak. Very fast, very strong, tall. They're both tall, which I love in a corner personally. I love the corners to be, especially your outside corners, to be 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", somewhere in there. That's just my personal opinion. But I love what both of these guys bring to the table. If you, like, these are my corner 1 and corner 2 in this draft. If you end up with either of these guys and pair them with Sutton, Mosley, Gardner Johnson, Walker, Joseph, all the other guys in that secondary, this is a damn good secondary, especially compared to last year. Sorry, Sean, to say this, but Dre Bly being the corners coach now, getting to work with either of these guys, I absolutely love. So I think either of these guys would be great to get at 6 or at 18. One of these guys might be there at 18. They're definitely not both there. But if you could get one of the guys I've listed at 1 and one of the guys I've listed at 2, and that's your first round, I would be ecstatic. I mean, that was me last year with Hutchinson and Jameson Williams. Those were the 2 guys I wanted pretty much from the beginning for the Lions. And for them to get both of them, I was ecstatic. Hopefully, Brad Holmes can do the same here. Sean said if he had to go anywhere, I'm glad he went to Detroit. Yeah, me too. Sucks that we stole him from your Tar Heels, but I'm glad he's coming here. Major upside for whoever is there at corner. Yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more. Number 3 is the last defensive position I have listed because I don't think we go a linebacker in the first round. And these are just first-round picks. So number 3, I have defensive tackle. I went Jalen Carter and Kalijah Cansey. Obviously, Jalen Carter is from Georgia. Kalijah Cansey played at Pittsburgh. They're 2 very different defensive tackles. Carter's big, physical, strong, fast. Obviously, came in heavy at the pro day. The off-the-field issues this offseason. I totally understand all of that. But I think if there's a place where he can go and you can get it out of him, get to play without all the off-field issues, I think it's Dan Campbell. I really do. I think Dan Campbell, this coaching staff in this locker room, can get him to just focus on football. And if you do, he's top 3 player in this draft class talent-wise. You're getting an elite defensive tackle. And a guy that, if he's just focused on football and just playing football and not worried about the other stuff, this is a top 10 D tackle in the NFL already. I do think, like after his first year, I'm not saying day 1, but an elite talent. It's just if Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have deemed him worthy of being picked, essentially, because they interviewed him at the Combine. They had him in for the top 30 visit, met with him at the pro day, everything. So it's kind of just up to what they think about him now. They've been talking to teammates, talking to coaches, so they've been very in-depth studying Jalen Carter. So they're obviously interested. Yeah, Sean, I started the show off with it. I'll just kind of recap it quick. So I think it is a win-win. I don't think he was getting the 5th-year option. I don't think he was coming back after this year. I expect him to be traded anyways. So to get something for him is a win for Detroit. The 5th-year option is $11.51 million, so you don't have to pay that next year. For a guy that was probably going to be our 3rd corner. And obviously, like I said, not too long ago, the corner class is loaded this year. So I expect 1, if not 2 corners to be drafted, probably 1 day 1 and 1 day 3. And then it's just he started off very good last year. He held Justin Jefferson 3 catches for 14 yards and made Kirk Cousins just kind of look the other way in that week 3 matchup against the Vikings. And then by week 9, 10, 11, 12, he was getting benched for Juju Hughes and guys like that should not have been playing over him. So he just kind of fell out of favor with Campbell and them. So it doesn't shock me at all that he's gone. Back to these guys, though. I think Carter, as a talent, is worth the number 1 pick. To me, though, Kalijah Kancey is a guy I wasn't huge on coming into the draft, but I didn't really know much about him. I saw a guy that I hadn't really heard of being taken at 6 by some people doing mock drafts and some at 18. I don't take Kancey at 6. I take him at 18. If we're going the defensive tackle route without Jalen Carter, I do take Kancey at 18 or one of those guys in the 2nd round, and Mozzie Smith, Siaki Ika, Javon Dexter from Florida. A couple of those guys are guys I'm looking at as well. But Kancey, and it's not just because he played at Pittsburgh, just like the guy I'm about to mention, reminds me a bit of Aaron Donald. Obviously, I don't think he's as good as what Aaron Donald is, but just there's a lot of similarities there. That smaller D tackle that's able to push the pocket, very good pass rusher, just stupid strong. I think it's a guy that has the potential to be a game wrecker, and at 18 with our 2nd first-round pick, I think you could take the chance on that 100%. Obviously, Carter played less snaps in a season, just because it's Georgia. They're so damn good, and they've got 5 5-star D tackles probably. But Kancey, if you look at the numbers, had a better pressure rate, was making quarterbacks' lives much worse throughout the entirety of the season than Jalen Carter was. So there's definitely an argument to be made for Kancey. I just think it's 18, not 6. And these last 2 offensive guys, they're both in play at 18, not at 6, in my opinion. O'Cyrus Torrence, the guard from Florida. You can finish off the offensive line if you get this guy. Dan Campbell might already, and Brad Holmes might already think the offensive line set with Big V, Vaitai, and Graham Glasgow being brought back to Detroit after he played a couple years in Denver for that right guard spot. Those 2, they might think it's set. But if O'Cyrus Torrence is still sitting there at 18, it's going to be hard to pass up, especially if all, 7 of the guys listed above are off the board. O'Cyrus Torrence, that you get him and your offensive line is set. 4 guys under the age of 26, if I'm not mistaken. And then obviously Taylor Decker's 29. He's like the 2nd or 3rd oldest player on the team. But I think Torrance should be in play. He's a road grader, solid pass blocker, can do it all. There's not really anything he can't do. He's athletic for his size, really good punch. I love everything he brings to the table, so I would love for him to be a Detroit Lion. And then number 5 for me, I know we just signed Marvin Jones, but that was a 1-year deal. If Quentin Johnston's still sitting there at 18, which from what I'm hearing, multiple teams only view 1 first-round receiver this year, and it's not Quentin Johnston. So there's a lot of teams that don't have a first-round grade on him, so a lot of teams might pass on him. It'll be interesting to see how the Lions view the wide receiver class. I don't think you need to take a receiver this early, but if, like I said, for Torrance, of all the guys above, including Torrance now, are taken off the board by 18, I I think you could consider it, especially if he's still sitting there. You pair him and Jameson Williams on the outside, that gives you your big, your jump ball threat in Johnston, your speed threat in Jameson Williams, and then your guy in the slot in Amon-Ra St. Brown. That screams with Montgomery and Swift, that offensive line. And if you get the tight ends to play like they did the second half of last season, this could be a very, very good offense again. A wide receiver is kind of an iffy pick, but I do think it's in play if all those guys gone. If you guys take Johnson as your number 1 or 2, I think there's a potential he's a number 3 because Amon-Ra is going to be the number 1. He's going to get the most targets. The last 2 years with Goff, St. Brown's gotten over 100, has gotten over 100 targets easily both years, but got over 100 receptions last year. So, and Goff was used to throwing to Cup and those kind of guys, those shorter routes, and that's where St. Brown makes all his money. So, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the number 1 regardless. And then if he can figure out that deep ball to Jameson Williams, I think Williams is the 2, and then you slide Johnson into that 3, and it's kind of like, okay, they're kind of pressed down. Jameson Williams has the safety over him. Okay, let's throw the jump ball to Johnson and see if he can get it. So I think that would be in play, and I think Johnson would be your 3, and a damn good number 3 at that. A couple other guys in play. I mean, if you think they're going to trade Swift, you could go Bijan Robinson. I don't think so because they just gave Montgomery $6 million a year. But there is still the potential there. At 6 or 18, they could go quarterback. If Levis is there, Richardson, if they think Hendon Hooker's the guy, and there's all this talk of him going somewhere like a Minnesota, Baltimore, somewhere like that, in the 20s, you could take him at 18. Especially if those defenders are off the board and you're sitting like Torrance, Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison, those kind of guys, and then a Will Levis is sitting there, or a Hendon Hooker, you could absolutely take quarterback there. I wouldn't hate Hendon Hooker is actually my number 3 quarterback just based on talent. But Sean said take Bijan and trade him to us. I actually, in my one mock draft, I had the Chargers trading you guys Austin Eckler, and then obviously some other picks moving around. They jump up to 16 and take Bijan, which would be just nasty, him in that Charger offense. But yeah, I agree. Let's just keep him out of Dallas. They've had enough good running backs over the years. Let somebody else get him. Me just as a football fan and just this team growing on me a bit. I mean, the Chargers obviously, but I'd love to see him go to Buffalo. Sean said, never mind. I love that move. Yeah. And then we got to see if Eckler's still going to get traded too, because that was the news. Week 1 of free agency was that he had requested the trade. So we'll see if anything happens there. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys. This show ran twice as long as any other show we've done since the beginning of this. So thank you for tuning in. Depending on topics, we'll either be back next week. We'll definitely be back at least once more before the draft. If there's enough to talk about, I'll be back on next week. We'll see how that goes. You can catch all the other shows at North Sports Dynasty on the pages you are watching from. There's Terribly Toxic moved from Wednesdays to Sundays. Off the Boards is our hockey show. I believe they're coming back this week on Thursday. The flagship North Sports Dynasty show is Friday nights. You can catch me on the NFL edition on Thursday nights. You can catch me and Mr. Sean Spencer on Let's Talk College Football Saturday mornings. Kind of all over the place right now with all these shows going on. Once the website gets figured out, you can catch my weekly articles on NFCNorthReport.com. Yes, this Saturday we are talking linebackers. top 5 sleepers, all that great stuff. And then we've got DBs and D tackles are the only other ones left. Yeah. So we'll have to slot D tackles in either this week or next week as well. Probably I would say this week personally, because if we're talking DBs as one episode, that's corners and safeties already. But Sean, we'll talk after the show here. Once again, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you later.